"Howard, do you need another drink?" James asked, looking at me from my minibar. "Of course, I wouldn't mind another glass, yes," I answered, already slightly slurring my tongue. Damn, it's only 2:30 in the afternoon, and I'm already starting to talk. Oh well. It's been 6 months since James's daughter got married. Madison was a wonderful bride, as was her partner, Sarah. I still remember that night. Well, most of it anyway, although I drank a lot then. I remember James walking her down the aisle and thinking about his daughter, Clarissa, with sadness that he never got to walk her down the aisle. Time has not healed my wounds, only dulled them slightly. We were sitting in the main salon of my yacht, Purgatory. I'm sure I had already drunk at least 3 of his almost famous beach pineapple cocktails and was quickly approaching complete intoxication, as expected. "How do you feel about retirement? Are you tired of lounging around on your boat?" "Boat?" I asked, slightly indignantly. "This yacht is over 140 feet long, sir." James immediately laughed, so much so that the laughter came from the depths of his stomach, almost bending him in half. Damn it, he teased me again. He'll never get tired of it, right? I paused to collect myself. "Well played, sir," then hiccuped. "And now about the drink." James took a moment to compose himself and then brought me a tall glass with another scoop of this delicious concoction. The thought suddenly occurred to me that this thing might be worth some money. The light bulb has not yet turned on, but the thread has already begun to warm up. At that moment, I heard a noise outside. James jumped up and walked towards the sliding door at the stern. "This is probably Tanya. She said she would join us after her trip to the city." He walked out, and I heard them whispering their love for each other before they walked into the salon holding hands. It was almost disgusting how sweet and in love they were with each other. I was happy for them, but I couldn't help but feel bitter too. "James, when the hell are you going to finally put a ring on her?" I asked, clearly having already drunk enough to ask such a question. Tanya blushed slightly, and James simply smiled. "Maybe I should slow down. It's only midday." "It's none of your business, sir, but she's worth the wait," he replied with a wide smile. Tanya beamed at his words and hugged his hand tightly. These two always puzzled me, but it didn't matter. I was just glad that my friend was happy. I remembered what it was like to be happy. Once upon a time, I too had a family who loved me, or so I thought. Now all I have left are these jokers. If only they knew. "James, damn it, give me that drink," I barked. "Hold your horses, old man." He laughed in response, by this moment already accustomed to my antics. I just frowned and walked towards him, or rather, I swayed. I finally made it to the bar and grabbed my drink. I drank it in one gulp and put the glass back, enjoying the burning sensation running down my throat. "I don't think I ever heard how you two met," Tanya remarked. "I met James later, so you both know how it happened." "Well, Tanya, you see," I began. "This old man came up to me at the bar and started hitting on me," James added, keeping a serious face. I felt anger rise in my cheeks until I realized he was mocking me again. "One day I will kill him. Damn it, James." At that moment he was already laughing, and a smile appeared on Tanya's face. When the laughter died down, I continued. "As I already said, we met right after he arrived here, in the resort lounge. I told him about my problems at the time, and he laughed until he dropped," James added with feigned indignation. "Oh, I'm sure I would laugh too," Tanya answered with a grin. Rolling my eyes, I continued. "So, after he told me his sad story, I gave him the number of someone who could help him find a place to live. He moved onto that little boat," I said, suddenly confused, forgetting what I was talking about. I really needed to cut down on the alcohol. I must have been really damn tired because I passed out. The sun rose on the horizon and the light woke me up. My head hurt, my stomach felt like a grenade had exploded in it, and my back hurt from sleeping on the couch again. I really need to cut down on how much I drink. One day I reached my cabin and immediately took a shower. The hot water began to work its magic as I washed myself. After I dried off, I brushed my teeth, took a couple of tablets, and drank a glass of water. I shook my head, looked in the mirror, and didn't like what I saw. I looked more tired than ever. My demons were catching up with me. At that moment, I heard some noise at the stern. Naturally, I put on my sandals and went to see who was there. "Good morning, Howard," James shouted. I winced, holding my head. "Damn it, man. Quiet, can you?" He just smiled and came up to me. I turned and waved for him to follow me back inside. We moved into the lounge, sitting on the sofas next to each other. I groaned as my stomach growled loudly. "Ha, haven't you eaten yet?" asked James. "I just woke up, actually." I couldn't lie to him, so why? What woke you up so early? Except to make sure you're still alive? Oh, and actually, it's almost noon. I wouldn't call it early in the morning. He mimicked me. I hate him. "Oh, don't make that face." "You know, I'm just kidding," James said. "But seriously, I saw something here that reminded me of you, so I came to discuss my thoughts." I just looked at him with the expression, "Come on faster already." "Our favorite bar is up for sale," he added. "This is news. We often went to a place on the beach where we ate light snacks and drank cocktails. James and I often grumbled about the elderly owner and his wife. They ran the place together, but it was more of a semi-retirement hobby than a livelihood. This was my favorite place besides my yacht. That's what I was capable of. Howard, I think we're worth buying. We could divide it into equal parts. How do you like this idea? I think I'll go back to bed. Seriously, I don't want it to be closed, and this will give us the opportunity to make it the way we want it," he exclaimed. His excitement made me put my forehead on my hands, trying to calm the headache. "James, what do we even know about running a bar?" James didn't answer immediately. He stood up and left the salon, returning with a sandwich on a plate and a bottle of water. He gave me 2 more Advils and water. I took the pills, drank some water, and picked up a plate. "You really should hire someone to help you operate this big thing," he said. "Your kitchen is a mess." He laughed, joking at his own expense. Still a big fool, this one. I just groaned at his weak humor, but had to agree that a small staff would be welcome at the moment. I put this thought aside for later. Now he was talking about buying a bar together. Oh, screw it, why not? "Okay, James, let's do this," I said. He was incredibly happy for some reason, and I wasn't going to stop him from enjoying the moment. When he stopped acting like a schoolgirl before graduation, he took out his cell phone and typed something on the screen. After a few seconds, I think he got the answer he was hoping for. "Okay, Tanya just told them that we want to buy it," he announced. I was stunned. "What? Did you leave it there when you came here? Damn it, what's the rush?" James ignored my grumbling and continued. "We need to start planning your big day. We will absolutely not celebrate my birthday. We will. You're one of my closest friends, Howard, and I won't let you drink this whole bottle of 18-year-old whiskey by yourself." Damn it. He knew about my plan for my 70th birthday. I hate him. How the hell did I get so old? June 1967. I was 20 years old and spending the summer at our family home on the lake. I worked as a lifeguard at a local church camp, just for fun. My parents were rich, so I didn't have to worry about money. My father became rich in oil after discovering a huge reserve of it underground on his parents' property. I wasn't raised with a silver spoon in my mouth, but by the time I left school, he had already made his fortune. My time at camp was wonderful, allowing me a little irresponsibility. I was just enjoying the summer like any other young American. The days were filled with sun, water, and girls. The evenings were filled with bonfires, beer, and good friends. I really miss those simpler times. That summer, I met the woman of my dreams. Her name was Ellen, and she was an angel. She also worked at the camp as one of the children's teachers. Every week, we received a new batch of children who needed to be entertained. Ellen and I had a fairy tale romance that summer. A whirlwind of warm summer nights spent naked on the beach under the moonlight. She understood me on a level that no one had ever understood. She teased me about how rich I was and how all the girls were crazy about me. I told her she was wrong, but of course I was hooked. We spent as much time together as we could and weren't looking forward to going back to school in the fall. We had to be separated, and nothing could be done about it. We promised to wait for each other, and we did so. These summer and holiday breaks were too short, but we made the most of them. She truly was my better half. After graduation, I proposed to her, and she said yes with tears in her eyes. I still don't know what she saw in me, but then I was grateful for it. In a few years, I would like to remember this moment. My parents helped us with the down payment on our first home, and although they were still rich, we had to find our way. My father was not the kind of person who just gives money away. In his eyes, every person must earn his own bread. I respected my father very much. We were on the path to our dreams. Ellen became pregnant and gave birth to our beautiful daughter, Clarissa. She was the second angel in my life, and we adored her. Everything was going well. Ellen stayed home with the child after quitting her job at the telephone exchange. We discussed it, and at that point, she just wanted to stay home with our baby. I supported her no matter what she decided. We also discussed the possibility of having more children, but that never happened. We were happy and life was good for what seemed like a long time. When Clarissa was about 10 years old, I was promoted to head of my company's local office. I worked as a middle manager at an auto parts manufacturing plant, one of several in the state. With my promotion, I got a new office and even a secretary. She, however, turned out to be more than just a secretary, but a real assistant, but the position of administrative assistant was not yet widespread. Her name was Candace, and she was a vixen with red hair. She was married but had no children, and her husband worked on oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. She joked about her stern husband Kyle and his schedule. He was away from home for weeks, so when he returned, she told me about their active life. And at home, everything was fine with Ellen, but we never returned to the passion that we had before Clarissa was born. We should go on a date tonight, I suggested to Ellen one Friday night. Oh, Howie, what about Clarice? I always liked it when she called me Howie. Well, maybe we can find a nanny or something. Maybe your parents can watch her for the night. In such a short time. How about we wait until she's asleep and watch a movie or something? That's how I lived. Life was good, but at the same time it seemed bland. I felt the need to live a fuller life, to enjoy it. The following Monday, over coffee, I mentioned to Candace about my boring weekend. I just don't understand. We used to have such a wonderful sex life, but now it's like a duty for her, I complained. Well, Kyle and I had a fight on Friday about his job. I want him to be home more often, even if it means we have to cut back on expenses. But he doesn't want to hear it, she replied. Our house was very cold all weekend. Sorry to hear that, I replied, not knowing what else to say. Sitting opposite each other, she looked at me with a thoughtful expression. She put her hand on mine and smiled. This gesture was like a spark that pierced me. I smiled back, and we went back to work. At the end of the day, I called Candace in to dictate a memo to all the shift managers. She entered and closed the door behind her. This was a bit unusual as we usually worked late, and the door was left open. After she finished writing down notes, she stood up and walked around my desk. I stood up, and she came close to me, her face only a few centimeters from mine. My heart beat faster, and my breath caught in my throat. I wish I could say I resisted, but I didn't. When I finally came to my senses, it was already too late. I liked it, and I drove away thoughts about my wife and daughter. Candace tried her best to make me forget them too. Now listen to me, you are a good person, and if our spouses never find out, it will not hurt them, she said reasonably. I should have told her no then and there. We both simply chose to ignore the possible consequences of our actions. It's stupid, but I agreed with what she said. Our office romance lasted almost 2 years before everything fell apart. It was Wednesday, and I will never forget this day. I called Ellen in the morning, again telling her that I would be about an hour late, but would still make it in time for dinner. She has been tired a lot lately, so I suggested she go to the doctor. She said she had to be home in time for dinner, and I planned to ask her about the visit when I got home, but I never got that chance. It was about 5 in the evening, and my door was closed again. Then my wife flew into the room. There was a moment of confusion on her face, and then all hell broke loose. Candace jumped up and ran to the door in a panic. Ellen just looked at me with an expression that almost stopped my heart. The pain in her eyes at that moment almost killed me. There was nothing I could say or do to take back the pain I caused her. Ellen was holding some papers in her hands, which fell to the floor. She quietly turned and left without saying a word. I picked up the papers and saw that they were some forms from the doctor's office. I couldn't figure out what they meant, but I couldn't help but notice the word biopsy written and circled on the page. Life became very hard without joy in our home. Ellen was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer and never touched me again. We argued for a while, but she eventually just gave up. She lost the will to live, and it was entirely my fault. I tried to convince her, even begged her to kick me out if it would help her get treatment. Nothing I said to her could bring her spark of life back. My selfish actions led to this, and she died within a few months of that terrible Wednesday afternoon. My daughter didn't know all the details, but she knew that I had cheated, causing her mother a lot of pain. She was furious that I hurt Ellen, and when cancer took her from us, I lost my little girl. We only spoke to each other when necessary. She always seemed depressed, and no amount of my pleas could reach her. We lived like this together until she graduated from school. She packed her things and left the first week of summer while I was at work. I haven't spoken to my daughter since she left. Finally, I found her. It took several private investigators and almost 2 years. When I found her, she was living in California with her then-fiancé Glenn. The detective's report said he was a good guy who worked in the film industry building sets. "Howard, come back to us," James shouted. I emerged from the memory, stunned that I had retreated so deeply into myself. James looked at me impatiently, tapping his foot. I asked if you could join me to sign the papers. Yes, of course. Let's go, I replied. It only took us a few minutes to get there, luckily. 80 degrees, with a nice warm breeze and soft waves lapping at the beach. The day was perfect, as always. James and I sat at the bar as the departing owner explained the details of the establishment. He laid out papers showing his financial details as well as existing contracts with food and drink suppliers. To be honest, I let James handle most of the stuff. I looked at the water, realizing it was perfect. A friend of mine convinced me to put down roots, even if it was in the form of a small bar on the beach. I was still living on the yacht, but this was where I was going to spend the rest of my life. I looked at James, who was smiling as he shook the salesman's hand. It was good for him, too. He had a hard time before arriving here, and it's not easier after that. This story with his ex-wife and the plane crash during a storm. I was starting to think he had 9 lives, or maybe he was just as skilled as MacGyver. But he was in love with Tanya, that was obvious. I think he was a little scared after what his ex-wife did, but overall they seemed like a happy couple. I was glad to see them happy together. They both meant a lot to me. James was like the son I never had. I might have had more children if I had not made such a huge mistake, and if cancer had not taken my love. Everything could have been completely different. "Howard," James shouted again. "Damn it, are you back on Earth?" he asked, laughing. "Yes, sorry, I was just daydreaming." "What did you say?" "You've been doing this a lot lately. Is everything okay?" "I'm just tired, sorry," I answered, evasively. "I was trying to tell you that it's your turn to sign if you still want to," he said. I cleared my throat and nodded. "Yes, I still want to. Where should I sign?" He pointed to a line on the last page, and I signed with as close a resemblance as possible to John Hancock's autograph. Once we were done with the signatures, Jeff, the outgoing owner, gave us a tour of the establishment. As a joke, he introduced us to one of the employees who was there at the time, Kelly Peterson. We visited this place so often that we knew almost all of the employees and considered them our friends. Besides Kelly, there were 2 other employees, Samantha Montgomery, who helped behind the bar in the evenings, and Jacob Paulson, who worked in the kitchen during lunch and dinner. Jeff's wife, Patricia, was also there often. "Kelly, guess what?" I asked jokingly. "Oh my God, Howard, What now? She answered with a slight groan. I laughed. Kelly was one of my favorites. She could always take a joke and hit back. Darling, now you work for me. She looked dejected and rested her forehead on her hands. Oh, Jeff, how could you? Seriously? James came to her aid. Hey, Kelly, don't listen to that old fool. He's just a co-owner. Oh, great, now I have two horny old bosses, she asked, looking up from the bar, laughing. I think I lost, right? James said with a feigned offended look. His offended look only lasted about 10 seconds before he and I burst out laughing together. Running this place with James will be a lot of fun. He truly became like the son I never had in many ways. Kelly, would you be nice and make James and me a beach pineapple cocktail, please? I asked. Will we now need to add this to the official menu? She asked. Well, to do that, we first need to create a formal menu, James added, laughing. Jeff always thought he was too good for that. Jeff didn't say anything, but gave James his middle finger in greeting. I've always liked Jeff. I think we should come up with a new name, huh? I pointed out. What, this unofficial drink? I thought you already called it beach pineapple, Kelly asked. No, you stupid bar. I can't imagine James and I running a place called Jeff's Cabin. How about you, James? Do you want to run Jeff's Cabin? Ha, no, thanks. You see, we need a new name. Anyone have any ideas? I asked. Kelly groaned and Jeff just laughed. You guys are idiots. You're an old beach bum, and this guy, she pointed at James, is just lucky. At that moment, Tanya came up to us to hug James. She acted as if they hadn't seen each other in a year. She held on to him so tightly. In a way, I was happy for them. I also felt a deep sadness from the daily reminder of what I had lost. Naturally, I downed the rest of my drink and stood up. Where are you going, Howard? Asked Tanya. I just arrived. I muttered, but obediently sat back down. This woman was something. James was a very lucky man, and I felt very lucky to have such good friends. I think you should name it after Howard, Tanya said. What? A bar called Howard? It sounds stupid, I replied. No, it should be called the Beach Bum, she said, laughing. I think we should vote. Anyone for the Beach Bum? James asked the group. Everyone except Jeff raised their hands. He raised his hands when James gave him a pointed look. What? He said. We are going to retire. I think the title sounds great, but my opinion isn't that important here. I'm flattered, I muttered. But it's still funny that you think I'm a tramp, I laughed. So we'll stick with Beach Bum, asked James. Howard, how did you end up here in Hawaii? I don't think I've ever heard that story, James said. Of course, James turned the vote into a story. Sometimes I hate James. Most of the time. Okay, as long as I'm not sober, we get along. Why do you think I drink so much? I answered. I really didn't want to discuss it. See, now you have to tell us, Kelly said, clearly excited. Knowing my friends, they will pester me until I tell them another story. Let's just say I had a lot of crap and decided to leave it behind. No, you won't get off that easy, James mimicked. Okay, but don't say I didn't warn you. After I lost my wife and my daughter practically abandoned me, I found myself in a numb state. I worked, ate, slept, and everything started again. The weekend was almost the same, except for Sundays. That day, I went to the local church and sat in the farthest corner, praying for forgiveness. I wasn't a particularly religious person, but I felt I owed it to Ellen. I could not atone for my sins, but I continued to go there out of some perverted sense of duty. The only thing I got out of it was the continued feeling of guilt. I couldn't stop blaming myself for my dear Ellen giving up. About a year after Clarissa moved in, I hit rock bottom. My parents were always upset when I was around, continuing to blame me for the destruction of a beautiful family. My daughter didn't contact them either, or if she did, they didn't tell me about it. I knew they loved me, but on the rare times I talked to my mom on the phone, it was always the same. Disappointment. Mom, I was thinking about coming to your house for Thanksgiving this year. I tried one cold October evening. Well, I guess we could cook a turkey or something. It's just a pity that you'll be alone again, she answered sadly. I know. Believe me, I know. You do realize that I would give anything to get this back, don't you? The line went silent for a minute. Mom, I heard a sob. Yes, dear, I'm here. I just miss them. The phone went off. I swore I heard her start sobbing before she hung up. This was my life. I had a daughter who didn't want to see me anymore and parents who couldn't talk to me without pain. I was a constant reminder to them of what I had messed up. Eventually, I went to see them, and within a year, we at least came to an understanding. I ruined everything, and we all knew it, but we had to move on with our lives. By that time, I had hired 2 private detective agencies to search for my daughter. I had no intention of interfering in her life, but I loved her too much to just forget about her. They first found her at a college in California, but she apparently dropped out after the first semester. Another whole year passed before they found anything new. She became pregnant and dropped out of school to become a mother. I became a grandfather. When I read their report, I gulped down my drink and made another one. After a while, I was drunk. Here I am, a 43-year-old widower, and now I'm a grandfather. Me again, I felt sadness for the family I no longer had. I turned to the bottle, it's time. At that time, I only had a few friends. Their names were Jameson, Glenfiddich, Macallan, and of course Jim and Jack in the evenings at the bar. So, have you ever talked to her? Kelly asked, now very interested in my story. I sighed. Yes, I did it. After I found out she had a baby, I wanted to try again. However, I knew I would have to get in shape before attempting it. It meant I wouldn't have to drink anymore. Ha ha ha, James laughed. We all know how that turned out, he continued with a smile, pointing to the now filled drink in front of me. To hell with you, sir, I said, laughing with him. A minute later, everyone calmed down again. I decided enough was enough, and I was going to try to get sober. I went to my doctor and was referred to a rehab clinic. His nurse at the time was a beautiful woman named Catherine. Long story short, I asked her out, and she said yes. Now I know that you are complete shit. There's no way the hot nurse agreed to go on a date with you, Tanya laughed, joining the conversation. Yes, because it happens every day, right? Kelly agreed. Seriously. She was very beautiful, and after a year of dating, she became my wife. I fell in love with this woman unconditionally, I answered calmly. Everyone stopped laughing, and an eerie silence fell over us. My story was supposed to continue at this point. It's time to end my confession. This visit to my doctor turned out to be one of the greatest moments of my life. The doctor made several recommendations regarding programs that I could participate in and also advised me to see a counselor about my personal problems. The big upside to all of this was that I found the courage to ask Catherine out, and she said yes. I haven't been with a woman since the last time I was with Candace, a long time ago. After I was discovered, my now departed wife never joined me in bed. Candace decided to resign and find a job with another company. Honestly, it's not that I missed sex, although I did have that, but rather that I haven't been intimate with anyone for a very long time. I remember our second date when we sat in a nice Italian restaurant and talked about our lives. So, do you prefer to be called Howie or Howard? She asked me. Oh, difficult questions, huh? I answered. Okay, let's do this. I prefer to be called Howard, but my closest friends called me Howie. Accustomed, she asked, catching my wording. Long story. And you? I tried to distract myself. She looked at me. Okay, I'll leave it alone for now, but you finally tell me the story. Fair enough, I reassured. I really didn't want to scare her away too quickly. I prefer to be called Katie. Catherine sounds too pompous and formal, like some nanny from the 20s. I still blame my parents for this. You're too beautiful to be a boring old nanny, I mimicked. She blushed. Thank you. You don't look that bad yourself, she smiled. That night we made love. I fell in love with her, and she ended up getting the whole long story out of me by our 4th date. I was in tears confessing my past to her. She pulled my head to her chest when I released her. For the first time in years, I felt connected to someone again. I proposed to her, and she agreed. We got married and enjoyed every minute we spent together. She told me about her childhood, her overbearing parents, and her crazy days in college. As a nurse, Katie worked crazy hours, but we made it work. We discussed it many times, but at our age, we weren't particularly interested in having children together. She loved children and sometimes worked with them at work. She tried to help me in my quest to reconnect with Clarissa, but it didn't happen. When Clarissa's daughter was about 2 years old, I felt I had improved enough to try to contact her again. It was the most nerve-wracking time I can ever remember. I sent her a long letter trying to explain how upset I was that I had let her and her mother down so badly. I tried to tell her that I wanted to be a part of her life again and that I still loved her very much. At this point, I started my little temple to her in the spare room of the house, Katie helping me with the collage. About a month after sending the letter, I received a response. She sent me a very short letter, which I still keep in my mailbox. I can still see the tear stains on this paper. Some of them were mine, and some were obviously from before it was mailed. I know you are my father, but I wonder if I ever really knew you. Growing up, you were always there to support me when things got tough. I was counting on you to be by my side. After everything that happened, who could I turn to for help? You? This is what you took from me. You took my father. I miss him. If you love me at all, you will never contact me again. Wow, I'm so sorry, Howard, Jane said. I could see in his eyes that he understood my pain. Yes, the one thing I wanted most in my life was never going to happen. On top of that, this was just before my father had a stroke and was institutionalized. He could no longer take care of himself and Mom became too old. I then talked to my mother, and at least we came to an understanding. She finally realized that it was partly her fault that we weren't close anymore. I mean, I know that it was my fault that I cheated on my wife, but my mother apologized for not being there for me, her son. It was a really difficult time in my life. Okay, before you go on, everyone needs a fresh shot of hard liquor, Sean exclaimed loudly as he approached. Everyone burst into laughter because of the huge presence that Sean always brought to the group. He was a mechanic friend of James and had followed him to the islands some time ago. Sean and I became fast friends, aside from the fact that he liked Kentucky bourbon. I forgave him for his terrible taste a long time ago. Kelly served the drinks, and Sean went behind the counter and made himself some. Bourbon on the rocks. Lots of bourbon. In a beer mug. I really like Sean. As he returned to emerge from behind the counter, he walked past Kelly, making sure to catch her as he passed. Look, Sean, my boyfriend might have to kick your ass, she warned, laughing. Yes, I'll definitely be careful, he replied, leaning over her shoulder to give her a kiss. So this guy is hitting on me at the bar. She joked. Everyone laughed, knowing that Kelly and Sean had been together for almost a month at that point. These two seemed like a very unlikely pairing at first, but they pulled it off impressively. In any case, it will be a different story for another time. I cleared my throat and continued, gaining everyone's attention again. Later that year, my father suffered a second stroke. He didn't survive it, and it completely broke my mother. We spoke to her at the funeral, and I felt that she would soon follow him. She was not physically ill, but it was clear that she no longer had the desire to live. They really were an amazing couple, I said, staring at my reflection in the mirror on the wall behind the bar. The Thanksgiving before my dad's first stroke, Katie and I joined my mom and dad at their house. We had a wonderful evening, and I enjoyed the feeling of being a family again. Howard, Katie, we're so glad you're with us, Mom said. Thank you, this is very important to me too, Katie replied. My parents are probably somewhere in the middle of Montana right now. Katie's parents are enjoying retirement in a caravan, I explained. The father began to laugh. That's why I threaten your mother all the time, but she is firmly convinced that we are not going anywhere. Mom just looked at him, and they both laughed at some personal joke. Dad took Mom's hand, and they leaned in for a quick kiss on the lips. They always did little things like that, even when I was a little boy. It was nice to see it again after everything that happened. Katie and I looked at each other and imitated my parents by giving each other a quick kiss. That was the last time we enjoyed a family meal together. After that, my father suffered a stroke, and we didn't get together as a family again until his funeral. So what happened after the funeral? What happened to Katie? James asked, emphasizing the obvious. I was no longer married. That, my boy, is another long story. Let's get something to eat first, okay? I suggested. Kelly and Jeff got busy preparing the fish in the kitchen, and we had an impromptu fish fry. The fish was lightly seasoned and cola grilled. They made corn tortillas and fries as sides, and cut up fresh cantaloupe. We drank another glass, and the fish went perfectly with our empty stomachs. We should make this a weekly event, don't you think? James suggested. This is actually a pretty good idea, Tanya agreed. I wish I could. It's decided, James announced. Everyone enjoyed the food and drinks, but I knew I would soon have to continue my story. I tried to remember where I left off. My mother passed away just a few short months after my father. I was very upset about their loss and completely threw myself into work. A week after my mother died, I met with my parents' lawyer to discuss their inheritance. Being an only child, I inherited almost everything. They donated 10% of their wealth to create a fund for a college in their honor. The rest went to me. I was already okay with my money, but after this inheritance, I no longer had anything to worry about. The net amount after paying taxes and paying off all debts was just under $112 million. I had no idea they were so rich. Suddenly, Katie and I were millionaires, and we had to have a serious conversation about our future. She admitted that although she enjoyed her job, she no longer wanted to work. Katie decided to volunteer for a charity for homeless and low-income families. This place really did wonders in helping these unfortunate people. Katie was truly able to make a difference in people's lives, and if it made her happy, it made me happy. She was such a good woman, I was proud to have her as my wife. A few months after receiving the inheritance, I began to work less and began to think seriously about retirement. I finally took my wife's advice and started a college fund for Clarissa. We hired a lawyer friend of ours to draft a formal letter stating that this was an inheritance from her grandparents. Naturally, my name was not mentioned in it. Thus began my quiet help to her and her family. I'm not sure at what point things started to go wrong, but I remember that Katie and I started spending less time together. She spent more and more time with new, secular friends. She became increasingly involved with the charity she had started with as a volunteer until she was elected to leadership. I was very proud of her, but it took up a lot of her time. When she had to travel for fundraising events, I tried to go with her as often as possible. However, there were several times when I could not go for various reasons. I had no reason to worry then. It was during one of these trips that I discovered that my wife was cheating on me, I said. There were a few sighs, and I continued. I had to stay at home, but the issue I was dealing with was resolved very quickly. Corny, I know, but I went to surprise her and caught them cheating. The details don't matter, but it was the end of our marriage. Money has completely ruined the wonderful woman she once was. After a minute of silence, James only said, "Wow." I continued, "So she broke my heart and I had to leave. She saw this young guy on the side and had the nerve to tell me that he was better than me. When our divorce was finalized, she received $2 million from my inheritance, but I kept the rest. My parents asked us both to sign a prenup because of their condition. The irony is that I was against it, but Katie, oddly enough, agreed then. I'm sure when we met, she couldn't even imagine that she would do this." "So you're saying that money made her cheat?" "I don't believe it," Sean stated. "No, I'm saying that all this money ruined her. She was no longer the kind and gentle woman I had fallen in love with, but I was too blind to see it. She's changed, and I blame it on money," I replied with a hint of anger in my voice. Okay. Got it," Sean said, raising his hands in defeat. "It just brought back some memories for me. So, I've been traveling for a while. Nothing could distract me from my loss. I bought Purgatory when I realized I needed to get as far away as possible. I hired a team to take me around the world, and 2 years later I ended up here, I finished. There was an awkward moment of silence until I heard the sound of glass. I looked and saw James smiling like a Cheshire cat, hiding something behind his back. "Why are you so happy?" I grumbled, like the old man I was. "Oh, no wonder," he said, approaching me. And then Kelly came out from behind the counter, holding a small cake with a lit candle on top. Everyone started singing that damn annoying song. I hate them. When they finished singing, everyone looked at me expectantly. Oh, to hell with it. As James would say, Hakuna Matata. Like an idiot, I blew out the candle. Naturally, he kept his wish a secret. "Thank you, everyone. This means a lot to an old man like me," I managed to say before a lump formed in my throat. "Happy birthday, Howard," James said, handing me a gift. This was the very thing that I had been looking for so long, but could not find. The box was matte black with a number 50 embossed on the front. It was a Glenfiddich 50-year-old whiskey, a rare collection. Bottle EST was almost $40,000. "Did you find it? Did you really find it?" I asked in disbelief. "Yes, it took a little effort, but I found it," James replied. "Thank you. No matter how you did it, thank you, my friend. Thank you, everyone." I looked around at my friends. They were all smiling at me, and I felt a peace that I hadn't known in a very long time. I was among my family. We enjoyed the little cake and joked while we ate. "Honestly, we just couldn't put out enough candles to cover your age," Sean exclaimed. "Thank you so much for this, sir," I replied, using the traditional phrase of gratitude. "Sorry, but you're too old for me," Sean retorted. I couldn't help myself. I burst into loud laughter. Everyone laughed with me, and it was wonderful to have such great friends. Eventually, people started to leave, and I returned to my yacht. The night was so beautiful that I didn't even have the desire to drink the rest of the night and went to bed early. It was the first truly restful sleep I had had in a long time. "Howard, you owe me stories about your adventures on the water," Sean reminded him again a few weeks later. "My friend, I will tell you these stories, but not today," I answered. He insisted that I tell him about my time after buying the yacht. There were sad moments spent in exotic ports when I wished that we could do this with my ex-wife. Perhaps if I had spent more time with her, she would not have gone down a crooked path. I'll probably never know. There were happy and even funny moments. These were probably the stories Sean wanted to hear. "I think I can tell you one," I conceded. He simply smiled, raised his glass, and knocked it against mine. That Saturday night, I felt like I had something to share with him. You see, about 6 months after the start of my journey, I stopped in Rio de Janeiro, one of the most breathtaking places I've ever seen. "I've never been there," Sean answered. His look said it all, as if to say, "Do you think I can afford a trip to Rio?" Sorry, I just remember it like it was just yesterday. There was something magical there for me. I felt the same thing here in Hawaii. This was the main reason why I decided to stay here forever. "So you stopped in Rio," Sean spurred me on. Yes, yes. Rio was a wonderful city, but the most wonderful thing I found there was Teresa. She restored my faith in humanity. I smiled, remembering her face. Teresa, if she was so special, why isn't she here? She always told me that she had too much love for one life. She was very honest and made it clear right away that she wasn't looking for anything serious. Teresa was amazing, and within a week, I felt like I had known her my whole life. I felt renewed, but knew I had to leave Rio before I became too attached to her. "Wow," was all he said, sipping his beer. Then James and Tanya came in, laughing about something as they walked. They sat down, and we greeted each other. "Another beautiful day, old man?" James joked. "Ha, yes, another day in paradise." James turned to Tanya. "Seriously, don't you regret not taking that role?" "No, I don't regret it at all. To be honest, I'm even glad I didn't take it," she replied. "What are you talking about?" "About that movie you mentioned," Sean asked. "Yes, the film was called Back Country. We watched it last night, and oh my God. I felt for Missy's character, but her boyfriend was an idiot. I kept screaming at the screen, Tanya said. Indeed, James added with a smile. But yes, I felt for her, so Missy played her role perfectly. The guy got what he deserved. Mostly, I just didn't want to be a part of it. Now I like to do voice acting and work on family projects, Tanya answered. Where is he? Someone shouted behind us, almost knocking me off my chair in surprise. Who are you looking for? Kelly asked from behind the counter. Howard Denton. A woman's voice rang out again, full of rage. So, lady, calm down, okay? Kelly asked. I'm here, I answered, turning around. Time has stopped. This can't be true. Why is she here? Clarissa, I said with difficulty, stunned. Dad, she practically spat this word. Her voice was full of poison. I blinked, not knowing what to do or say. I knew my face was stunned, just like everyone else in the bar. Something needed to be said. What are you doing here? Did something happen? I respected your desire to never contact you again. I finally found my voice. It's been killing me all these years, but I never tried to contact you after your letter. She looked at me as if I had grown horns. What about her? She shouted, pointing at Tanya. And as if time had moved on again, Tanya finally understood. Mother, what are you doing here? Why did you call Howard Dad? All eyes turned to me. I think I should explain everything, huh? Clarissa continued to glare at me, nodding only once. I looked around at my friends and finally settled on Tanya. The time has come to tell the whole truth. Tanya came to me because I was trying to help her financially. I helped fund one of her projects a few years ago, so she contacted me to thank me. I tried so hard not to interfere in your lives, but I couldn't sit back and do nothing. You were still my little girl. You caused me pain that I never expected to experience, Clarissa accused me, and tears began to fill her eyes. I bowed my head in shame. I know. I still miss her, you know. She was too good for me, I replied. I will regret the pain I caused your mother and you for the rest of my life. Silence reigned in the room until James cleared his throat. Sorry, Howard, it's my fault she's here. I didn't know that she was Tanya's mother. I found her and sent a letter about you. I tried to help after you told us about her at your birthday party. Mom, this is the guy I told you about. This is James, Tanya said. Clarissa turned to James. That guy you fell in love with? Honey, he's my age. I know that. He has a daughter almost my age. I don't care, and I hope you understand how important he is to me. I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. It was the weirdest situation I've ever been in, except maybe the day Ellen walked in on me with Candace. I came back to reality and looked at my daughter. God, how beautiful she was. So, Clarissa began, you are so beautiful. You look so much like your mother. I tried to say, but tears were already flowing down my cheeks. Any anger remaining in Clarissa melted away. She sat down at the table next to us, looking sad and depressed. She also has eyes screwed up. In fact, I looked around and didn't see a dry eye. Terrible weaklings, I hate them all. Clarissa, I never stopped wanting to be a part of your life. I watched you, but I never interfered. I attended your college graduation after you returned to school. As a young mother, it couldn't have been easy, but you did it. I was so proud of you. When Tanya was little, I tried to be at several of her events too. When she was 8, I hid in the back of the room at her dance recital. When you were elected mayor of your hometown, I saved a newspaper clipping of a photograph taken during your speech. I also saw all the films in which Tanya starred. How could I not see? She's my granddaughter. I stopped, unable to continue. I started crying. I cried like a baby and couldn't do anything about it. I felt someone hug me and then squeeze me tightly. When I calmed down a little and opened my eyes, all my friends were also sobbing, and Tanya released her bear hug. I always wondered why you were so interested in my career then, she said. I'm so glad that you are my grandfather. I hugged her tightly before we let go of each other. Tanya looked at her mother and waved her hand to join us in the hug. I missed you, Dad, she screamed, sounding like my little girl again. This opened the floodgates in both of us again. "I'm so sorry," I said. "I will never forgive myself for this. I lost the two most important people in my life, and I couldn't blame anyone but myself. I was too hurt to understand that you also lost your mother. You didn't give her the cancer that killed her. Now I understand it," Clarissa said sadly. "I loved your mother very much, but I loved you too. My heart broke the day I read your letter. I knew you were angry, but the fact that I caused all this pain. Everyone went home, and I invited her to stay in one of the guest cabins on my yacht for the night. She noticed the name on the stern as we approached the boat. "Purgatory?" she asked. "The story of my life," I nodded as I spoke. "Didn't I say that I never forgave myself?" She simply nodded. We boarded and spent some time in the cabin drinking our nightcap. Clarissa sat and looked at me. "What?" I asked. "I just can't believe everything that happened. When I was little, I thought that you and Mom were like a prince and princess. When I grew up, I still thought that you both were head over heels in love with each other. Why, Dad, why did you do this?" she asked. There is no easy answer to this question. I've asked myself the same question 1,000 times over the past few decades. Was it her? Did Mom do something wrong? I can assure you that this had nothing to do with your mother. I think that's what killed us the most. She was completely innocent. I became selfish and forgot why I loved her so much. I think I started to take her for granted that she would always be there. "Why didn't you try harder to convince her to get treatment?" she asked again, with pain in her voice. "I did everything I could. Begged her. He tried to bribe her by offering to leave. I suggested that she take revenge on me with another man. I even begged her to go to a psychologist, but she had already lost her will. It broke me. 2 years after I got married, I tried to contact you again. Aaron, it was my husband, who convinced me to try it. He said I shouldn't keep all this negative energy inside me, and I went home. By then, you had already moved, and no one was around to know where you went. I didn't even know. After I sold everything, I moved here. I kept an eye on how you were doing, but I didn't pursue you. I didn't know. Your last letter was very painful to me, but I respected your wish." We sat in silence, digesting the events of the day. She finally got up and said she was tired, going to bed. The next day, we spent almost 8 hours reconnecting. She told me about her husband, and we talked about Tanya. I told her about my marriage to Catherine and how it ended. Finally, we talked about the future and staying in touch with each other. After dinner, she packed her things for the morning flight home. We had dinner with James and Tanya, and it truly was like family. The next morning, there were a lot of emotions. James kissed Tanya goodbye as she flew to Australia to film a family film. He planned to join her in a week, but being apart even for such a short time made them especially sentimental. Weakling. Clarissa cried saying goodbye to Tanya and me. "Be sure to call when you land," I said. Now that she was in my life again, I didn't want to lose her again. "I promise. I must come to you for the holidays this year," I said. "I would like it." "Bye, Dad," she said, and we hugged for the last time. My life was far from perfect, but that night I felt pretty good. As I prepared for bed, I said a silent prayer to Ellen. I could only hope that she heard me. "Thank you for being my wife. I hope you are proud of our daughter that you helped raise, and one day I hope you forgive me. I love you." I just hoped that one day I could forgive myself. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.